Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman. And this is the Old School Tri Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby. The show that talks about all things triathlon, old and new. We're powered by Ansco Foods, bringing you nutrition and good health from New Zealand's beef and lamb. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to the Old School Tri Show, brought to you by our great friends at Ansco Foods. And today, Brian, well, it's amazing how we embrace athletes from all around the world, but this man is really synonymous when it comes to Ironman racing all around the globe.
He certainly is, and he was the first men's back-to-back winner at Ironman New Zealand, described as the beast from the east, Pennsylvania's Ken Glah.
Ansco Foods is proud to be the new naming partner of Ironman New Zealand, ensuring every stroke, pedal and stride is powered by the best nature has to offer. Ansco Foods is on a mission to bring nutrition and good health from New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Ansco Foods, putting the iron in Ironman with New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Visit anscofoods.com/Ironman to find out more.
Well, what an absolute privilege for us to be joined on the Old School Tri Show today by someone who has been incredibly loyal to Ironman New Zealand over 40 years. And of course, he's stood on the top spot of the podium a couple of times and plenty of other podium finishes as well. Ken Glah from Pennsylvania, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, guys. It's going to be a fun time, I think.
Ken, let's look at some numbers first to get a perspective on your overall career. Just firstly, I mean, your Ironman goes back a long, long way, your Ironman career. Do you know how many you've done altogether?
My first few were in Kona because there weren't many Ironman races out there at that point. The first race that I did that wasn't Kona was New Zealand in 1990. So right. I started in 84 and I don't know exactly how many, somewhere around 100, but I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're in the triple figures. Us nerds sort of chase these numbers and stuff. So how many, because we know, and Cameron's talked about this a lot, when you get to the finish line at Ironman New Zealand and Mike Riley, who we worked with for so many years in the commentary, he'd always talk about the number of consecutive finishes that you had in Kona. And I did a bit of poking around, and you've finished at least 35 times in Kona as well.
Yeah, I have 36 in a row, and since COVID, I haven't been back. So well, I was there, I just wasn't racing. So.
Yeah. And what about Ironman New Zealand? How many times there?
More than 20. More than 20,
yeah.
And the same with Brazil. I think more than 20 or around 20 times in Brazil.
Wow. Well, so let's call it triple figures. You're up in the 100 somewhere. It's quite incredible. So when you decided to come to New Zealand in 1990, you were a well-seasoned pro by that stage. All those Kona appearances and the like. What drew you to New Zealand? Why New Zealand?
Well, my ex-wife, Jan Wanklin, her mom and sister lived in New Zealand. And 1990 was also the first year of the Ironman World Series where they had a point series. New Zealand kicked that off. So that's, I had a few reasons to be there.
Yeah. Did you, with the family connection here, were you able to sort of come out earlier and acclimatize
because I was racing professionally and so was Jan. We were down there probably for 2 months or so. So we got out of the winter here and went down there and we did that for about 9 years straight, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
And where in the country were you based when you were training here in New Zealand, Kim?
In New Plymouth.
Yeah. Beautiful part of the world. So there's some nice bike riding down there, isn't there?
Yeah, I hear a lot of pros go there now.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, I went there before anybody knew much about it, but I did quite a bit, some riding with Blair Cox, and
Yeah.
he and I are real good mates. So
He goes okay on a bike, doesn't he, Blair?
yeah, he goes okay on the bike. Yeah.
He goes well.
Yeah, yeah, and coming down here to do Ironman New Zealand's, you're a Northern Hemisphere guy, so you've done all those, the racing there. It's kind of turning your life around a wee bit. That's almost an off-season scenario for you. So was that a big adjustment for you?
Well, when I was just doing Kona, I would I'd start racing, short course races and up to like half Ironman. Um, I'd start doing that stuff in usually late March, beginning of April down south in the U.S. And then I would do Kona and then do 4 or 5 short course races afterwards, where I raced every weekend, just living off my fitness. And they were actually some of my best races, because in between all I did was just stay loose, and then so my legs were really fresh for those races. And then about the beginning of December, I would take a month to 6 weeks almost completely off, except for maybe going into the gym, and then start back up in mid-January and gradually build back up for the next season. So once I started doing more Ironman races, with New Zealand being early, because it used to be it used to fluctuate when it was up in Auckland, because they had to go according to the tides, because when the tide was out early on the Sunday morning, it was way out. So
Yeah.
so it fluctuated, but it was anywhere from the first to usually the third weekend of March. So it was early. And we'd go down to New Zealand, Jan and I, and eventually my daughter Rhiannon, and train down there. So at that point, I pretty much stopped racing after Kona. So, sometime, and back then, Kona also fluctuated according to the full moon. So I would go usually between mid to late October, till about December, with very little training, if any, and then start up in December to get start building back up to do New Zealand. Yeah.
Yeah. Just backpedaling a wee bit. I mean, you're almost like the second generation of professionals in Ironman, if you like. You're a little bit younger than the Tinleys and the Molinas and those guys. Did you still feel like a trailblazer at that? Because it was a young sport, Did you feel like you were blazing a trail?
Well, yeah, especially on the East Coast, and I did my first racing professionally in '83. No, 83 or 84, but yeah, I mean, I wound up leaving university because I didn't want those guys to get too big a jump on me. They'd already had 2 or 3 years on me. So '84 was my first Kona. Tinley and Dave Scott, they were doing Ironman, starting in 1980, I guess. So they had a little bit more of a jump on me than Molina and Mark Allen, but I wasn't too far behind them, and it worked out well.
Yeah. So did you? I mean, this is a sport in its infancy. Did you have like an immediate love affair with it and think, I want to make a living out of this. So I'm going to make a career out of this sport? Because what you're sort of describing, it kind of sounds that way.
Yeah, I met somebody doing a century ride right after I finished high school. I did a big trip up around Nova Scotia, bike packing trip, and came back really fit and did a century ride. And the guy's like, "Oh, you're a runner. You should do this race I'm doing." So I had three weeks to learn how to swim, basically. And it was a mile and a half swim in the ocean, 64 degrees. So, I don't know, like 17 probably degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
And, I had no body fat. I was an 18-year-old runner. So I kind of laugh at people now when they, with wetsuits and, we need to wear a wetsuit.
Yeah.
It's like, no. So yeah, it was a 1.5-mile swim, a 60-mile bike, and a 15-mile run. And, it was just so much fun because I spent the whole day passing people because of where I got out of the water. And so it really, I fell in love with it right then, but I was on scholarship to race in university. So I raced my first year at university, cross country, indoor and outdoor track. And then I switched universities and I had to sit out a year. Back then you couldn't, when you were a Division I school going to another Division I school, you had to sit out. And during that time, all of 83, the summer and into the fall, I was racing triathlons, and then I just decided never to go back to running in university. It was kind of weird back then because they had no age limit on kids starting, and there were guys like at University of Texas, El Paso, and Farley Dickinson University, school up in Rhode Island. The youngest guy on those teams were like 27, 28 years old, So they were staying home in England or Africa, Ireland, and they'd wait until they got good enough to get a U.S. scholarship. And they were men. We were, most of us were boys, 19, 20 years old, And I just said, no, I don't need to knock heads against them because I was a good runner, but I wasn't that good. And triathlons was just, I love the fact that you could train so much, with the running background, and even if I was running 100 miles a week, it's still, and lifting, and it's still not that many hours training. And when I could, train 25, 30 hours a week, and then eventually I was training 40 hours a week. But to be able to do that was just so much fun. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So the whole lifestyle, you bought into it from the go-get. Yeah.
No, I mean, as much as I love the racing, I just, going out on those long bike rides, long runs, I just loved it. Still do.
What sort of distances you were saying, Ken, you were doing cross country and then your athletics at university? What was your jam? Were you a 5,000 meter runner or 10,000? Were you shorter?
In high school, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania, we only went up to the metric equivalent of the 2 miles, so 3,200 meters. In New Jersey and New York, they were running the 5K, which would have been really good for me. So, because I just, my best mile was maybe a 4:20 or something like that. I just didn't have the leg speed to really. I did okay in the 2 mile or the 3,200 meter, but a 5K would have been really good. So when I got into university, the cross country was, they were still doing some old school courses that were 5 miles, but any of the major races were 10K. And then indoor and outdoor track, I was doing the 3,000 and the 5,000, outdoor track to 10,000.
Yeah. So the progression to start doing long distance actually worked in your favor, as it were.
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, the longer the event, the better it was for me. And I had some good, half marathon times. I only did 2 marathons. The first one I made the mistake of thinking the other guys knew what they were doing, and I hung back with the second pack, and we still went through the halfway mark at, I think, a 1:11. Wow. And there was only 3 or 4 guys in the race that had ever gone under 2:20. So I figured, I'm in 25th place. I should be okay. And next thing I know, I just blew so badly, and did everybody else except for 5 or 6 guys. Yeah. So I did that one in 83, and then spring of 84, I did one, and that one I almost even split it. I think the second half was 30 seconds different than the first, and I did like a 2:27, 2:27:30. So unfortunately, I've never done another one except for at the tail end of Ironman races.
Yeah, and very respectable times there too. I'd sort of looking at before some of your splits at Ironman New Zealand. But look, we get to the start line in 1990. You're in New Zealand, and a race that sometimes coming second is bigger than winning, and that's kind of what transpired. So much so that here you are on the cover of the 20th anniversary book as well. It was. What are your memories of that? Is it bittersweet? To background for people, Paulie Kuru and Ken, the closest ever finish in an Ironman.
Yeah, I mean, it was, we went back and forth. On the bike, we went back and forth a couple times. I had 2 punctures. I punctured once and changed the tire. And as I was putting the wheel back on, the sidewall of the new tire blew out. So I had to change it all over again. Blew out right in my face. It was, and so at that point, Paulie had gotten in front of me. Then I repassed him late in the bike ride. Then he repassed me early in the run. Then I repassed him. And with 8K to go on the waterfront, when we turned around down in right down where they all the yachts park for the around the world race when they stop and off.
Down in the viaduct in the city.
The viaduct, yeah. So we turned around at the viaduct, and right there is when he caught me for the last time. And so we ran together coming back that last 8K, and it was into a headwind. And so neither of us could get away from the other. As soon as somebody put in a surge, all you had to do was tuck in behind them. And the guy that put the surge in just couldn't get away. So we were surging back and forth against each other multiple times. And then as we got really close to the finish, he surged just as we were supposed to go off the footpath onto the road. And then maybe 20, 30 meters later is when all the signage started along the roadside, like an A-frame type signage. And the crowd was all lined up there. So all of a sudden he was gone. He was up on the sidewalk. I was down on the road, and the finish line's right in front of me. And I'm thinking, oh, this is a pretty crappy way to win. And then, so I was kind of not pumped up, whereas he had gone off course. He jumped over the barricade, and I see him coming in out of the corner of my eye, and he was just totally pumped. And so, it took me a second or two to throw it back into another gear, and it was just too late. We virtually crossed, he was like a chest in front of me, maybe, almost a lean at the tape.
You're literally both credited with the same time, 8:39:12. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there wasn't more than a couple hundredths of a second. Like I said, it was maybe 6 inches. In it.
Wow.
So,
and I mean, how did you feel afterwards?
to begin with, it felt pretty crappy, but as you said, coming second, I mean, that race got a lot of publicity and for a lot of years. So it in a way it did okay for my career. I wish I would have been the guy, that was 6 inches in front, but that's life.
Yeah. We've talked a bit over the last little while with some of the former victors of Ironman New Zealand. And we talk about the early days and how strong those fields were, Ken. And just looking at the top 5 finishes in 1990, it was Paulie and yourself, let's call it neck and neck. Then you got Scott Tinley, Scott Molina, Ray Browning as your top 5. I mean, that's just incredible fields, aren't they?
Yes. So the 5 of us we were all, I believe, in the year before in '89. Melina, I guess Melina was. I don't know if Melina was there, but the other four would have been in the top 10. And then it was like that most years. Same with the women, because there was only 4 or 5 other Ironman races around the world other than Kona. There was Lanzarote, Ironman Europe, which was Germany in Roth, then Japan, New Zealand, Australia, Canada. So yeah, there were 6, and it stayed that way, I think, for a few more years, probably until about 93, 94, and then a couple others may have been added, but it really wasn't until the late 90s that the numbers started growing internationally, outside of the U.S. But in the U.S. or North America, I should say, all we had was Ironman Canada. And eventually Ironman allowed Graham Fraser, who had the contract for North America, to put on more races. And so, between maybe 99, 2000 and 2006, 2007, it built up to about 6 races in North America. And at that point, by 2007 or so, there were quite a few more races added around the world as well. So then the field started dispersing. But, during the 90s, almost every year in New Zealand, you'd have 4 or 5 guys, 4 or 5 women that were either in the top 10 the year before in Kona or had definitely been in the top 10 at some point in their career in Kona. So it was a lot of fun.
Just finally on that 1990 race, I mean, there was like a 3-minute split on in favor of Paulie on the bike, and obviously your double puncture was a feature there. Ray Browning had a couple of punctures that day as well. Was there something going on? Was there sort of water, or bringing up the glass, or was it a big day for punctures all around?
I'm not sure what was my first puncture. I think the second one with the tire I put on. We were riding. Well, I'm assuming the others were riding sew-ups as well. So I had a sew-up on, and I had it under, the 2 spare tires underneath my seat. And I think with the rough roads, it was just rubbing against my seat rail and weakened the sidewall. I mean, ever since then, now I double side duct tape and wrap it so that, the tires are protected. So live and learn. But I think what caused the initial one, I'm not sure, but the sidewall blowing out was, I think, from just rubbing on my seat rails.
We definitely don't have the lovely concrete highways of the US and Europe here in New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, our roads are pretty rough around here. They're nice and quiet, but they're pretty rough. And yeah, it's when I go over to Europe and ride, it's a different world over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 1991, you come back and Paulie's not there, but again, it's a super stellar field. The guys that are lining up, and I guess there's people are going to put a ring around your name and say, okay, well, we know what this guy is capable of. He's a bit of an animal on the marathon, and he performed so well last year, but it kind of didn't play out so well for you that day. What went wrong?
I had 2 issues. One was I had a really thick bladder that went underneath my seat that you pumped fluid in, and so the bladder wanted to compress, and you had a tube that went up to your handlebars, and you just bit on a piece, a rubber piece that opened up, and it forced the fluid into your mouth. So that's where all my calories were. And I didn't know what went wrong. It was very simple. There was a kink in the hose right underneath the seat. So I couldn't get any of my calories. Now, had I been smart and stopped, it would have been a 10-second fix. So yeah, I was my nutrition I couldn't get. and so I was grabbing stuff from the aid stations, but definitely didn't get enough of what I needed, and so I wasn't doing that great. And then 5K, 10K from the finish, I hit a pothole and punctured. And so between the two of those, when I got onto the run, mentally, I just, I went through the motions. I think I finished up around 8th or so.
Yeah.
And then a month later, I was racing in Australia. So I had a good day over there. So I was in shape, but I had a few things going against me. And then, mentally, I just didn't have it in the run. And Jan wound up winning both New Zealand and Australia that year.
Yeah.
So she did well.
Well, so you obviously crossed the ditch and raced with a bit of anger in Australia. You said you had a good day. How good was Australia for you that year?
I was third. Paulie won, and
he sort of owned that race.
I can't remember who was second, but yeah.
Paulie sort of owned that race, didn't he, for a lot of years, Australia?
I think he may have won it maybe 4 or 5 times. I'm not sure, but that was the only year I did it. But New Zealand I did many more times.
Many more times, including 1992, and finally it all falls into place for you. On the back of a blistering marathon, a 2:43, which is sort of right up there with your very, very best. You get onto the top step.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I believe I had to. Yeah, I did. I had to chase somebody down.
Stefan Cole.
Year.
Yeah, Stefan.
Yes, Stefan Cole. Yep, from I believe Western Australia, maybe Busselton.
Yeah.
And or no, Perth. I mean, he was Perth, I believe. So he had a really strong bike, and I was just making up time on him the whole way, and I caught him pretty late. I know you might have the times there. I can't remember how big the difference was, but I had to run fast. Yeah, and it's back then it was what was it, 26K of hills. We went 13K out, 13K back. It was very hilly. And then when we got back to the transition, it was 8K down to the viaduct and 8K back along the waterfront, dead flat. So I think that was actually a faster course than when it was all along the waterfront. I think a dead flat course the whole way, you're just running with the same stride, and it makes it hard late in the race because you got that local muscular fatigue from running with a very similar stride the whole way, whereas up and down hills you're switching it up, and I think that actually helped.
Yeah, I just looking when you're going head to head with Paulie, it was something like a 2:50 marathon that day. 2 years later, a 2:43. So you've really sort of given it death. And I said your winning margin over Stefan was just over a minute, about a minute 20. So that's a good scrap. That's a great scrap.
So I would have caught him pretty late. Probably only I was running quite a bit faster than him, but if he was a minute or so behind me, I probably only caught him with maybe 3 or 4K to go, given the speed differential.
Well, Stefan probably thinks to himself as time goes on what could have been, because looking at the splits, Ken, he had a pretty decent lead on you onto the run. Looking at the math here, we're talking about 10 minutes ahead of you onto that. But yeah, as Brian was saying, you ran a 2:43, he ran a 2:54, and that minute and a bit was the difference in the end. Yeah,
no, he was way out. He was way out in front, and we all had our work cut out for us to try and chase him down.
Yeah. So that's not just your first Ironman New Zealand win, but that's your first Ironman win as well that year.
That was, yes.
Yeah.
92.
So here you are, this I guess 8 years a professional, roughly. At that point, what did that sort of mean to you at the time? Was it a sense of relief? Was there jubilation? How were you feeling?
Well, I mean, I guess at that point, so up through 91 would have been so I'd done Kona 8 times at that point. 91 would have been my 8th year in Kona. And then outside of Kona, at that point I'd only done New Zealand twice. Oh no, that's right. I did because we were doing the World Series. So I did New Zealand twice. I did Australia once, Canada twice at that point, and maybe Ironman Europe, Germany, I may have done twice. So yeah, I guess at that point I had done about 6, 7 other non-Kona Ironmans. So I'd knocked on the door a few times, but it was nice. It was a nice one to win.
And I'm guessing the other sort of pros that doing the World Series and so on, they're kind of probably a little bit surprised, thinking this can't be Glah's first win. Glah's been around forever, and he's been putting hurt on us and smashing us over. They're probably surprised that you hadn't had a win prior to that point.
Yeah, I mean, it was like we said earlier. It was tough going at all those races because I don't know that you ever really rocked up to a race where there wasn't 5 or 6 guys that were top 10 in Hawaii, kind of thing. So it wasn't real far off, kind of a Kona field at a lot of those races, especially over in Europe. Yeah.
Yeah. So you come back a year later, and you're a defending champion. So that's a whole new dynamic. There's a big target on your back.
Yeah, that certainly was.
Yeah, top seeding. So, well, look, you get the job done. What was that like then, mentally for you, racing as a defending champion? What changed, if anything?
I mean, I felt a little bit of pressure, but I wasn't going to let it get to me. As much as we might think it's a big sport, it really it's not that big in the grand scheme of things. So I did feel the pressure to perform. I actually came down in 93 by myself because Jam was very pregnant with our daughter. She was born in the end of April. So I did most of my training here in Pennsylvania for the 93 race. And I was very lucky. We had a somewhat mild winter, so I was able to go out and do some 4 and 5 hour rides. I had to pick and choose the day, but I was able to get pretty much all the training in. It was cold, but I got it all in. And then I came down and did about, I think maybe a week or so of hard training in New Plymouth before I tapered. And it came together. It was, once again, I had to run. I can't remember who I ran down. I don't know if that was Scott Balance maybe, but I once again, I ran a 2:45 and I was definitely chasing to get there. And then I believe in 94, I may have been second.
Yes, you were behind Scott Balance. Yeah.
Behind Scott.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't Scott the year before, because 94 I was chasing pretty hard on Scott, and I just ran out of real estate. Yeah.
In that.
Sorry, Brian. I was just going to say it was Dirk Espinay was second place in 93.
In 93, okay. Yep.
Yeah. So it with that sort of that 93 race, the other thing about it was a little bit unusual. There was a little bit of weirdness on that one on the bike as well, if you recall, with you and Melina off the front.
So yes, Melina and I were off the front, and we were told to go a different way than the course. And we wanted to turn. They told us no, straight. And the lead vehicle went straight. We questioned it. So we just assumed something had gone wrong, accident, whatever. And they had to make a diversion. Not the case. I guess the lead cop, the lead car, just went the wrong way. So we got back on course. Once they realized what had happened, they measured the difference between the two. And when we got back to transition, they told us beforehand that we were going to have to ride down the waterfront. I don't know if it was 2 or 3K down, 2 or 3K back, to make up the distance we lost. So it was controversial. We didn't do the prescribed course, but we were told not to do the prescribed course. So Dirk was not happy, and I can understand. But from a mental aspect, it was tough on him. Physically, we all did the same distance, but I understand where he was coming from for sure.
Yeah. So you've become the first person to go back to back at Ironman New Zealand, which is pretty cool. No one will ever take that one away from you, which is tremendous.
Well,
in fact,
it's always good when you do something the first time. It's hard for anybody to do it the first time again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that was a great year for you, wasn't it? I mean, you become a dad. You had a really good, solid performance in Kona as well. Do you sort of put a ring around that one and say, yep, that was my year?
That year was a big year for me. In '92, I didn't do the series because it was I forget what it was. It was 3 plus Kona is what they allowed, and Kona was double points, and it was just too much. Like the year I did 91, where I had the bad race in New Zealand, I wound up doing 3 other Ironmans plus Kona. So I did 5 that year because I wanted to drop the points off from New Zealand because of how bad a race I had. And so in 92, I was just like, no, that's too much. And then for the 93 season, they cut it back. You could count only 2 international races and then Kona. And so I did the series again in 93, and I did New Zealand, won that. I did Ironman Canada, and I won that, and my daughter was there, so that was kind of special. And then yeah, I had a good race in Kona, 4th, I think, or 5th.
Yeah, I think
Something like that.
Yeah, you remained very loyal to Ironman New Zealand, and you mentioned before Scott Balance, the victory for him, but another 2nd place for you. Again, a 2nd place, I think, behind Stefan Holzner the next year in 95. You're still on the podium in 96. You're always there, always sort of putting the hurt on people. Did that Auckland course, was that a course that really suited you? We've spoken with Scott Balance, and he looks back very fondly on that course.
Yeah, it was it was a tough course. It was a very tough course. And I think once they changed it to when it was, became all flat on the run, I think that was to my disadvantage. I think having 26K of hills at the beginning of the run was something that was good for me. But yeah, it was the bike there was always tough. I mean, the road surface was relatively rough, the chip surface. We would get winds from all different directions. And there were years where we had hail, cold rain. The temperature could change really quickly if a storm came through, and you could get really cold on the bike and then, cook on the run. So in the same race. So it was a tough course for sure, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Through all of this period, Ken, and I think remiss of me not to ask you earlier, are you always been self-coached, or have you taken coaches on, or right through all of this period of you absolutely flying, what was your plan? Did you have mentors, coaches? How did it work?
No, I've never had a coach. When I was a kid, I was self-coached. I ran on a team that was about 20 miles away from me, but my older brothers and one of my older sisters ran. So, I learned a lot from them. I had a coach in the first high school I was at that really couldn't have cared less about the team. As a matter of fact, one of our biggest races, I wound up driving the whole team to the race, and he did a charity 5-mile race the same day as the district championships to qualify for state. So yeah, I mean, I was pretty much coaching myself, and then I switched schools, and that's really when first time I really had a good solid coach. Was the last year and a half of high school, and then in college, the reason I switched universities was because of the coach. So after that, I was self-coached all through my triathlon career.
What about swimming? You know, you mentioned earlier on, I think you had like 3 weeks to kind of learn how to swim ahead of your first race and stuff. So what did you do with that?
Well, I guess I shouldn't say. I mean, as far as my program, I was self-coached. I did do some swimming with teams. Getting my butt kicked by 10-year-old girls and stuff, and I trained over in New Jersey a bit in, I guess, 80, 83 and 84, and I trained under on and off under a swim coach over there that had quite a few Olympians. So he kicked my butt pretty well, and then by the mid 80s, a few of the guys right here in my hometown that came from a swimming background started racing professionally as well. So I did a lot of my swim training with them, and they were top swimmers. So yeah.
Well, at what point did you surrender your pro license and go to age group racing? Because you seem to you were well into your 40s. I think you're still racing pro.
Yeah. So so I believe the 20th anniversary of New Zealand, I was still racing pro. I think I finished like 8th that year.
Yeah.
And that may have been my last year racing pro. I think so. I know that it could have been 2005. If it was 2005, that was the year I made a mistake. I think that's what it was. I think 2005 I raced pro, but it was actually, I showed up at a race, half Ironman in Chile that I'd been doing 4 or 5 years in a row, and just without even thinking, registered as pro. And by then I had my business, and it originally started off with just trips to Ironman Brazil. But by 2005, I had probably 5 or 6 different races. So, I was working sometimes 100-hour weeks, especially when I was at an event. There was no way I should have been racing pro anymore. But but the problem was, with Ironman, when you signed up and did a race as a pro, you had to race pro the full year. So I had no choice, and I got my butt handed to me quite a few times that year.
Let's talk about your business, endurance sports travel, and you mentioned initially it was sort of Brazil, but I guess well, tell us a bit about the business that's allowed you to sort of keep your hand in a sport that you still dearly love.
Yeah, so I won Ironman Brazil 3 times, and I actually won the race 4 times. The first year was a 2/3 Ironman distance race, and it had slots for Kona, but they wanted to kind of introduce, an event between a half and a full. So I won that 4 times, and the guy that had the license, he had a 4-year deal with Ironman. And I'd done quite a few other races in Brazil as well, and I knew a race director, and the two of us went to Tampa and met with Ironman and secured the contract for the next 4 years. And so I was involved with the race management while I was still racing. And the first year we had the race down in Florianopolis, I really didn't like the way things went as far as the assistance for international athletes. So, so I started the business just primarily to make it easier for internationals to go to Ironman Brazil. And then, just build it up from there. The race in Pucón, Chile, uh, Ironman Switzerland, they asked me to do a trip for their race. And then Ironman New Zealand, I think in 2005 or 2006, I started taking groups there and just expanded as as the sport expanded, I expanded, and eventually got up to about 24, 25 races worldwide between halves and fulls. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got any bucket list races? I mean, for a bloke that's been racing 40 odd years, is there any events that you haven't done? You think, I've still got to tick this one off.
Well, as you can figure out, I mean, the fact that I did Brazil 20 times, Kona 36 times, and New Zealand 20 sometimes, there's a lot of races out there I haven't done. But so I did a lot of races over and over again. As far as iconic races, I did Nice quite a few times back in the day when it was a bigger race than Kona. I did it 7 times from 84 to 89, and then stopped doing that because of the unequal prize money. And at that point, there was enough Ironman races and other races that were equal prize money that I really didn't need to support that. So, but I got 4th in 1984 at that race, and that really was the World Championships that year. All the European guys were there, and most of the North American pros, and it was a good, tough race, and that was a lot of fun to get 4th against all the top guys.
And
then I went to Kona and blew up, thinking I was hot shit.
It's just the kind of race that would suit you as well, Ken. I mean, that's a fair few hills up and down through the back of that bike course.
Yeah, the problem with Nice was the descents. I just didn't have the balls to go down the hills or the technical skills to go down the hills the way the other guys did. Yeah. I would notoriously lose, anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes on the descents, which, for somebody that's a good descender, it's, physically it's free speed. You're not, I mean, free time. You're not having to put out energy to get that time. You're using your skill level to get that time. And I just didn't have that skill level. So that always hindered me over there. So I had good races, but I never really had, a great race. 84 was probably my best one the first year I was there. So, yeah, I mean, there's like Alcatraz. I've never done Alcatraz.
Yeah.
That's a race that's been around forever and is pretty iconic. The race in St. Croix, that was, I did that a lot. And that was a really challenging and fun race, big pro race back in the day. So there's not too many I missed, but I did Japan. I only did it once. I only did Ironman Australia once, the original one. Now, I mean, there's 40 some Ironman races. So I mean, of the original races, I think I did all of them except for Lanzarote. So that would be another one that would be, an old school bucket list race that would be fun to do at some point. Maybe when I'm 70 or something.
As an aside, it's interesting. I read recently that the Ironman Japan, after a period of time of not having one, is coming back, which is great to see as well as one of the original races.
Yeah, they've moved it around a few times, but yes, that'll be great to have a race back in Japan again because it was a classic race for quite a few years. Yeah.
Will we be able to get you back on a start line in New Zealand again? Is that likely at any point?
Definitely. I mean, I'm kind of bummed I'm not going to be there for the 40th. But I will be back for sure. I mean, it's yeah, I've missed being there. I haven't been down at all. Not just not racing. In 2020, I did have a group there that Blair took care of for me. Blair and Robin took care of that for me because I was figuring I was coming down in December for the half Ironman World Championship. So so I skipped it that year, and I didn't get to see my daughter who lives in Australia now, and then everything got locked down. And so, not only did I miss Ironman New Zealand for 3 years, but I missed getting down there and seeing my daughter. So I'm looking forward to getting back down. I'll be down in December for the half World Championships with the group. And then I think I'm going to add Ironman New Zealand back into the mix for 2025. Yeah. So.
Well, we very much look forward to seeing you here for the 70.3 World Champs and for Ironman New Zealand. And Ken, thank you so much for giving so much of your time and your reminiscences of the of your involvement in 40 years of Ironman New Zealand, and wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, and you as well. Take care, guys.